The fluorescent lights of Lincoln Elementary's main hallway buzzed overhead as I adjusted my daughter Emma's backpack straps one final time. At 8 years old, she was already showing the quiet resilience I recognized from my own military training. But today her small shoulders seemed to carry more weight than usual. "Remember what we practiced, sweetheart," I whispered, crouching down to meet her eyes. "If anyone says anything mean, you hold your head high and walk away. We don't let other people's words define us." Emma nodded, her chin trembling slightly. "But, Mama, what if Aunt Rebecca says those things again, about how I'm different?" My jaw tightened at the memory of last weekend's family barbecue. My sister, Rebecca, with her perfect suburban life and honor roll twins, had made several cutting remarks about Emma's learning differences. Comments about how some children just aren't cut out for regular school, and how military families often struggle with stability. Each word had felt like a knife, especially coming from someone who was supposed to love and support my daughter. "Your Aunt Rebecca doesn't understand everything about you, baby girl. That's her problem, not yours," I said, smoothing down her dark curls. "You're smart, kind, and brave. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As a former Air Force intelligence officer, I'd faced down hostile interrogations and navigated complex international crises, but nothing had prepared me for the challenge of raising a daughter with dyslexia as a single mother. After my husband died in a training accident 3 years ago, I'd left the service to focus entirely on Emma. The transition from Captain Sarah Mitchell to just Emma's mom had been jarring, but my daughter needed stability more than I needed the uniform. The morning bell rang, echoing through the corridors as children streamed past us toward their classrooms. I watched Emma take a deep breath, squaring her shoulders in a way that reminded me of soldiers preparing for deployment. She was about to face another day in Mrs. Henderson's 3rd grade class, where reading aloud was torture and math problems seemed to dance off the page. "Mrs. Mitchell?" A warm voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Principal Adams approaching, her expression unusually serious. Margaret Adams was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. In the 2 years since Emma started at Lincoln Elementary, she'd become more than just an administrator. She was an advocate. "Good morning, Principal Adams," I replied, instinctively standing straighter. Old habits from military life died hard. "I was hoping to catch you this morning. Could I have a word in my office after Emma gets settled in class? There's something important we need to discuss." A chill ran down my spine. In my experience, important discussions with school officials rarely brought good news, especially for children who didn't fit the typical mold. Emma looked up at me with worried eyes, picking up on the tension in the adult conversation. "Is everything okay?" I asked, though Principal Adams's carefully neutral expression told me this wasn't a casual chat. "Let's just say there's been a development regarding Emma's educational plan. Some concerns have been raised." She glanced meaningfully at Emma, clearly not wanting to discuss details in front of her. "But I want you to know that I stand firmly behind every student in this school, regardless of their learning style or family circumstances." The emphasis on those last words made my stomach drop. Someone had been talking about Emma, about our family situation, and given Rebecca's tendency to overshare her opinions with anyone who would listen, including other parents in our small town, I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly where these concerns were coming from. Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Mama, I need to go to class now." I forced a smile, kissing her forehead. "Go show them how amazing you are, sweetheart. I'll be right here when you need me." As I watched my daughter disappear into the classroom, Principal Adams' words echoed in my mind. Whatever was coming, I had the feeling this conversation would change everything. Principal Adams' office felt smaller than usual as I settled into the familiar chair across from her desk. The walls were lined with children's artwork and achievement certificates. But today the cheerful decorations couldn't mask the gravity in her expression. "Sarah, I'll get straight to the point," she began, folding her hands on her desk. The school board received a formal complaint yesterday, questioning Emma's placement in our mainstream program. The complaint suggests that children with learning disabilities are receiving unfair advantages and taking resources away from typical students. My blood ran cold. A formal complaint? From whom? Principal Adams hesitated, then slid a document across her desk. My eyes immediately found the signature at the bottom. Rebecca Mitchell Patterson. My own sister had filed an official complaint against my daughter. She's citing concerns about Emma's accommodations, the extra time on tests, the modified assignments, the reading support. She's arguing that these accommodations create an unfair learning environment for other children. Principal Adams' voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the underlying anger. She's also questioning whether military families provide adequate stability for children with special needs. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd survived combat zones, intelligence briefings that could determine life or death, but nothing had prepared me for this betrayal. My own sister was using my military service, something I'd been proud of, as ammunition against my child. "What does this mean for Emma?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt tight. "The school board is calling for a review of her individualized education program. They want to reassess whether she belongs in mainstream classes or should be moved to the special education track." Principal Adams leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "Sarah, I want you to know that I will fight this with everything I have. Emma belongs exactly where she is. She's making progress. She's socially integrated, and her teachers adore her." I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the playground. Children were running and laughing during recess, including Emma, who was playing hopscotch with two other girls. She looked so normal, so happy. The thought of her being pulled from this environment and labeled as different made my chest tight with rage. "How long do we have?" I asked, turning back to Principal Adams. "The review is scheduled for next Friday. The board will meet with Emma's teachers, the school psychologist, and they'll want to interview both you and Emma." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sarah, I need you to know that your sister has been quite vocal in the community about this. She's gathered support from several other parents who feel that accommodations for special needs children are somehow diminishing their own children's education." The betrayal cut deeper than any enemy fire I'd faced overseas. Rebecca wasn't just attacking Emma's educational rights. She was systematically building a case against us, using her connections in our small town to turn other parents against my daughter. "She doesn't understand what she's doing," I said, though even as I spoke the words, I knew they weren't true. Rebecca knew exactly what she was doing. She'd always resented that I'd chosen military service over the traditional path she'd taken, and now she was using Emma's challenges as proof that her way was superior. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my military training kicking in. When faced with a threat, you assess, you plan, and you execute. Principal Adams smiled for the first time since I'd entered her office. "I need you to be the advocate I know you are. Emma needs her mother to fight for her the same way you fought for your country. And Sarah, I'm not going into this battle alone. We're going to show that school board exactly what Emma is capable of, and we're going to make sure she gets every opportunity she deserves." As I left her office, one thought crystallized in my mind. My sister had just declared war on my daughter, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. She was going up against someone trained to win. That evening, I found myself in an unexpected situation. Principal Adams had called an emergency meeting with Emma's entire educational team, and I was sitting around a conference table with 5 people who would determine my daughter's academic future. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of Mrs. Henderson, the school psychologist, Dr. Martinez, the reading specialist, Ms. Chen, and 2 other teachers I'd only met briefly during parent conferences. "Before we begin," Principal Adams said, her voice carrying the authority I remembered from commanding officers, "I want everyone to understand that we're here to advocate for Emma Mitchell, not to question her right to be in our school. Mrs. Henderson, Emma's third-grade teacher, immediately spoke up. "I've been teaching for 15 years, and Emma is one of the most determined students I've ever had. Yes, she struggles with reading, but she's found creative ways to demonstrate her understanding. Just yesterday, she built a diorama explaining the water cycle when she couldn't write the essay." Dr. Martinez nodded, flipping through a thick file. "Emma's psychological evaluation shows above-average intelligence. Her dyslexia affects her processing speed, not her ability to learn. The accommodations she receives simply level the playing field." As each team member spoke about Emma's progress and potential, I felt a surge of pride mixed with determination. These people saw my daughter for who she really was, not through the lens of limitations that Rebecca seemed determined to impose. "The challenge we're facing," Principal Adams continued, "is that Mrs. Mitchell-Patterson has convinced several parents that Emma's accommodations are somehow cheating. She's scheduled a presentation to the school board next Friday, right before our review meeting." My stomach dropped. Rebecca wasn't just filing complaints. She was mounting a full campaign. "What kind of presentation?" Ms. Chen, the reading specialist, looked uncomfortable. "She's gathered test scores from other students and is arguing that children receiving accommodations have an unfair advantage. She's also questioning whether single military parents can provide the stability needed for children with learning differences." The personal attack stung, but it also clarified something important. This wasn't really about Emma's education. It was about Rebecca's need to prove that her traditional family model was superior. She was using my daughter as a weapon in a battle I didn't even know we were fighting. "Here's what concerns me most," Dr. Martinez said quietly. "Emma's been asking her classmates if they think she's stupid. Word is getting around school that some parents are questioning why she gets special treatment. The social impact is starting to affect her confidence." My hands clenched into fists under the table. Emma had been so proud of her progress this year. She'd finally made friends, started raising her hand in class, even volunteered to help younger students with art projects. The thought of her questioning her own worth because of adult politics made my chest burn with anger. "What's our strategy?" I asked, falling back on military terminology that felt natural in this high-stakes situation. Principal Adams leaned forward. "We document everything. Every success, every breakthrough, every moment of growth. We show the board that Emma isn't just surviving in mainstream classes. She's thriving. But Sarah, I need you to prepare for the possibility that Rebecca's campaign might gain traction. Some board members are already asking questions about resource allocation." The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like combat gear. I'd fought for my country overseas, but this battle was more personal than any mission I'd ever undertaken. My daughter's future hung in the balance, and my own sister was leading the charge against her. As the meeting concluded and the teachers filed out, each offering words of support and encouragement, I realized that this conference room had become my new command center. The enemy had superior numbers and home field advantage, but they'd underestimated one crucial factor: a mother's determination to protect her child. The war Rebecca had declared was about to begin in earnest, and I intended to win. The next few days felt like preparing for a covert operation, except this time the stakes were my daughter's self-worth. I spent hours each evening documenting Emma's progress, gathering evidence of her achievements, and building what felt like a defense case for her right to simply exist in a regular classroom. But it was Emma herself who provided the most heartbreaking revelation. On Wednesday night, as I helped her with homework at our kitchen table, she looked up from her math worksheet with tears in her eyes. "Mama, did I do something wrong? Tyler's mom won't let him play with me anymore. And Jessica said her daddy thinks I'm taking help away from smart kids." The words hit me like shrapnel. My 8-year-old daughter was internalizing the adult prejudices being spread through our community. I knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in mine. "Sweetheart, you haven't done anything wrong. Some grown-ups don't understand that everyone learns differently, and they're scared of things they don't understand. But Aunt Rebecca understands, right? She's family. I struggled to find words that wouldn't destroy Emma's faith in family bonds while still protecting her from the truth. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the people who should love you most can become your biggest adversaries? Aunt Rebecca thinks she's helping, but she doesn't understand what you need to succeed, I said carefully. Sometimes people who love us can still make mistakes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years in intelligence work, analyzing enemy motivations and predicting strategic moves. But I'd completely missed the signs that my own sister harbored such deep resentment toward our choices. Thursday brought an unexpected ally. Mrs. Patterson, one of the parents Rebecca had recruited to her cause, appeared at my door that evening, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Sarah, I need to apologize," she said, wringing her hands. Rebecca showed me some test scores and convinced me that Emma was somehow taking opportunities away from my son. But then I watched them together at the school science fair today. She paused, seeming to gather courage. Emma spent 20 minutes helping Danny understand how magnets work. She couldn't read the instruction card, so she figured it out by experimenting, then taught him through demonstration. My son learned more in those 20 minutes than he had in weeks of traditional instruction. Mrs. Patterson's voice grew stronger. "Rebecca's been telling us that accommodations are unfair advantages, but I realized today that Emma works twice as hard as other kids just to keep up. That's not an advantage. That's courage." Her defection from Rebecca's campaign was encouraging, but it also revealed how sophisticated my sister's strategy had become. She wasn't just filing complaints. She was systematically turning our community against Emma by appealing to parents' fears about their own children's success. That night, I called my former commanding officer, Colonel Roberts, seeking advice on handling what felt like psychological warfare in a suburban setting. His response was both validating and sobering. "Mitchell, you're facing a classic disinformation campaign. Your sister is using emotional manipulation and selective data to create fear-based decisions. The key is controlling the narrative with facts and personal testimony." But even as I planned my strategy, a deeper fear was growing. Emma had started having nightmares, waking up crying about being the dumb kid and asking if we could move somewhere else. The confident, resilient little girl who'd been thriving just weeks ago was beginning to retreat into herself. Friday morning arrived with the weight of an impending battle. As I walked Emma to her classroom, she clung to my hand tighter than usual. "Mama, what if they decide I don't belong here?" I stopped in the hallway, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Then we'll find another place where you do belong. But Emma, I want you to remember something. You belong anywhere you choose to be brave, kind, and true to yourself." As I watched her walk into Mrs. Henderson's classroom, I realized that today's school board meeting wasn't just about educational policy. It was about whether a community would choose fear or understanding, exclusion, or inclusion, and my sister had made it clear which side she was fighting for. The school board meeting room felt like a tribunal as I took my seat in the front row, facing 5 board members seated behind the imposing wooden table. The room was packed with parents, teachers, and community members, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. I spotted Rebecca across the aisle, surrounded by her supporters, looking confident and prepared for battle. Principal Adams presented first, methodically outlining Emma's progress and the legal requirements for accommodating students with learning differences. Her presentation was professional and compelling, backed by data and testimonials from Emma's teachers. I felt a surge of hope as she concluded with Emma's recent achievements and social integration. Then it was Rebecca's turn. My sister stood with the poise of someone accustomed to getting her way, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. She began with what sounded like concern for all children's education, but quickly revealed the poison beneath. "Ladies and gentlemen, "We're facing a crisis of fairness in our schools," she began, clicking to her first slide showing test score comparisons. "When some children receive unlimited time on tests, while others are held to strict standards, we're not creating equality. We're creating a system that rewards disability over ability." The words stung, but worse was watching several parents nod in agreement. She'd done her homework, presenting carefully unselected statistics that made Emma's accommodations look like cheating rather than necessary support. "Furthermore," Rebecca continued, her voice growing stronger, "we must consider whether single-parent military families can provide the stability these special needs children require. The constant relocations, the absent parent during deployments, the trauma of military life, these factors compound learning difficulties and place additional burden on our school resources." My chest tightened as she systematically dismantled not just Emma's right to accommodations, but my fitness as a parent. She painted a picture of military families as inherently unstable, of children like Emma as drains on the system rather than valued students. The final blow came when she called her star witness, Dr. Patricia Williams, an educational consultant who'd never met Emma but spoke authoritatively about the dangers of over-accommodating learning differences. Dr. Williams presented research suggesting that children with dyslexia performed better in specialized settings, away from the distractions and pressures of mainstream classrooms. "In conclusion," Rebecca said, looking directly at me with cold determination, "we must ask ourselves whether we're truly helping these children by pretending they can succeed in environments designed for typical learners. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is acknowledge limitations and provide appropriate alternative placements." The room erupted in murmured conversations as Rebecca returned to her seat, clearly satisfied with her performance. I felt the walls closing in as I realized how thoroughly she'd prepared for this moment. Every argument I'd planned seemed inadequate against her polished presentation and expert testimony. Board Member Johnson leaned forward, his expression grave. "Mrs. Mitchell, you'll have your opportunity to respond, but first we'd like to hear from Emma's current teachers. One by one, Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Martinez, and Ms. Chen stood to defend Emma's placement, but I could see doubt creeping into the board members' faces. Rebecca's presentation had been too polished, too convincing. The seed of fear she'd planted about fairness and resources was taking root. When my turn finally came, I stood on shaking legs, looking out at a room full of faces that seemed to have already made their decision. The notes I'd prepared felt inadequate, my voice uncertain as I began to speak about Emma's progress and potential. But halfway through my presentation, Board President Stevens interrupted. "Mrs. Mitchell, while we appreciate your advocacy for your daughter, we must consider the broader impact on our educational system. The board will deliberate and provide our decision within the week." As the meeting adjourned, I watched Rebecca accept congratulations from her supporters while I stood alone, feeling like I'd just lost the most important battle of my life. Emma's future hung in the balance, and I'd failed to protect her. The weight of defeat pressed down on me as I walked to my car, the echo of Rebecca's triumphant laughter still ringing in my ears. But as I reached for my keys, a gentle hand touched my shoulder. "Mrs. Mitchell?" I turned to find Mrs. Henderson, her eyes filled with determination rather than the sympathy I'd expected. "That was just the opening skirmish. The real battle hasn't begun yet." Behind her stood Dr. Martinez, Ms. Chen, and to my surprise, Mrs. Patterson, along with 3 other parents I didn't recognize. "Sarah," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "we need to talk. There's something Rebecca doesn't know about Emma, something that could change everything." We gathered at a nearby diner, an unlikely war council of teachers and parents, united by a common purpose. Mrs. Henderson pulled out a folder I'd never seen before, filled with Emma's work from the past month. "Look at this," she said, spreading out papers across the worn Formica table. "Emma's been helping other struggling students during reading time. Not just helping, teaching them strategies she's developed to work around her own challenges. 3 children, who were failing reading comprehension, are now showing marked improvement because of Emma's peer tutoring. Ms. Chen leaned forward, her voice urgent. And this week, when we had the emergency drill, Emma was the one who noticed that Marcus, the boy with autism in her class, was having a panic attack. While other kids were focused on following procedures, Emma stayed with him, used the calming techniques she'd learned from her own therapy sessions. Mrs. Patterson spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. My son Danny told me something tonight that broke my heart. He said Emma asked him why his mom didn't like her anymore, and when he couldn't answer, she told him it was okay, because sometimes grown-ups get scared when kids are different. An 8-year-old child was comforting my son about adult prejudice. The stories continued, each one revealing a side of Emma that even I hadn't fully recognized. My daughter wasn't just surviving in mainstream classes despite her challenges. She was becoming a leader, using her own struggles to help others navigate theirs. Dr. Martinez pulled out his phone, scrolling through recent emails. I've been in contact with Dr. Sarah Williams, not the consultant Rebecca brought in, but the leading researcher on inclusive education at Columbia University. She's reviewed Emma's case and wants to testify on her behalf. She's driving down tomorrow morning. But will the board reconvene? I asked, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since the meeting ended. Principal Adams appeared at our table as if summoned. They will if we present new evidence that significantly impacts their decision. I've been making calls since the meeting ended. Sarah, your sister, made one crucial mistake tonight. She sat down, her expression fierce with purpose. She attacked not just Emma's accommodations, but military families as a whole. 3 board members are veterans, including Board President Stevens. His daughter struggled with PTSD after her deployment in Afghanistan. Rebecca's comments about military trauma didn't sit well with him. Mrs. Henderson pulled out her phone, showing me a group text thread. We've been organizing since we left the meeting. 15 teachers are prepared to testify about inclusive education benefits. 23 parents want to speak about how children like Emma have positively impacted their kids' development. The diner suddenly felt like a command center, filled with the energy of people who'd found their cause. But the most important revelation came from Ms. Chen, who'd been quietly reviewing Emma's latest assessment scores. Sarah, Emma's reading level has improved by 18 months in the past 6 months. She's not just keeping up anymore. She's accelerating. The accommodations aren't holding her back or giving her unfair advantages. They're allowing her true capabilities to emerge. As I looked around the table at these dedicated educators and parents who'd chosen to fight for my daughter, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my military days. The unshakable bond of people united in a righteous mission. Rebecca thought she'd won tonight, but she'd actually awakened a sleeping giant. The final battle was coming, and this time, I wouldn't be fighting alone. The emergency school board session convened at 7 a.m. the next morning, with the same packed room, but a dramatically different energy. Principal Adams had worked through the night to arrange for Dr. Sarah Williams to join us via video conference, and the evidence we'd gathered sat in neat folders before each board member. Rebecca arrived looking confident, clearly expecting a quick confirmation of the previous night's decision. But her expression shifted when she saw the organized presence of teachers, parents, and community members who'd rallied to Emma's defense. The smug certainty in her eyes flickered with the first hint of doubt. Board President Stevens called the session to order with unusual gravity. We've received substantial new evidence that requires consideration before finalizing our decision regarding Emma Mitchell's educational placement. Dr. Williams appeared on the large screen, her credentials as Columbia University's leading inclusive education researcher immediately commanding respect. Her testimony was methodical and devastating to Rebecca's arguments. The research is unequivocal, Dr. Williams stated, her voice carrying the authority of decades of study. Children with learning differences, who remain in inclusive environments, don't just perform better academically, they develop crucial social and emotional skills. More importantly, their presence benefits all students by fostering empathy, creative problem-solving, and collaborative learning. She clicked through slides showing longitudinal studies. Students like Emma often become peer mentors, precisely because they've learned to approach problems differently. They develop resilience and innovative thinking that serves entire classroom communities. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably as Dr. Williams directly addressed her consultant's testimony. Dr. Patricia Williams's research is outdated and has been largely discredited. Current best practices strongly support inclusive education with appropriate accommodations. But the real turning point came when Mrs. Henderson stood to present Emma's recent work. She displayed projects showing Emma's creative approaches to learning, her peer tutoring documentation, and testimonials from students Emma had helped. Emma hasn't just met grade-level expectations, Mrs. Henderson announced. She's exceeded them in areas that matter most: leadership, empathy, and innovative thinking. Her accommodations haven't given her advantages. They've revealed her natural gifts. The room's energy shifted palpably, as parent after parent stood to share how Emma had positively impacted their children. Marcus's mother tearfully described how Emma's kindness during his autism-related difficulties had taught her son about friendship. 3 parents whose children struggled with confidence spoke about Emma's gentle encouragement during group projects. When Mrs. Patterson stood, her voice carried the weight of personal transformation. I was wrong to support this complaint. Emma Mitchell isn't taking resources from our children. She's teaching them lessons about courage and compassion that no textbook could provide. Board member Johnson, himself a veteran, leaned forward with visible emotion. Mrs. Mitchell Patterson, your presentation last night suggested that military families are inherently unstable and traumatic for children. As someone who served 3 tours overseas, I find that characterization both inaccurate and deeply offensive. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. I didn't mean to imply. I was simply concerned about educational resources. You questioned a mother's fitness to parent based on her service to our country. Stevens interrupted, his voice steel. You attacked a child's right to education based on her neurological differences. Those aren't educational concerns. They're discrimination. The final blow came when Emma herself appeared in the doorway with Principal Adams. My daughter walked to the front of the room with quiet dignity, carrying a poster she'd made the night before. I made this for the people who think I don't belong here, she said in her clear 8-year-old voice. The poster showed stick figures of different colors and sizes, holding hands around a school building, with words written in her careful handwriting. Different is not less. We all belong. Emma looked directly at Rebecca, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. Aunt Rebecca, I know you think I'm not smart enough for regular school, but Mrs. Henderson says smart comes in lots of different ways. I hope someday you'll understand that being different doesn't mean being wrong. The silence in the room was profound. Rebecca sat frozen, confronted by the dignity and grace of the child she'd tried to diminish. Several board members wiped away tears as Emma returned to sit beside me. Stevens cleared his throat, his decision evident in his expression. The board votes unanimously to maintain Emma Mitchell's current educational placement with full accommodations. Furthermore, we're implementing a district-wide inclusive education training program to ensure all students receive the support they deserve. As the room erupted in applause, I felt the weight of victory mixed with profound sadness. We'd won the battle for Emma's education, but the cost had been the relationship with my sister. Rebecca gathered her papers and left without a word, her supporters melting away like shadows at sunrise. Emma tugged at my sleeve, her eyes bright with understanding beyond her years. Mama, did we win? Yes, sweetheart, I whispered, pulling her close. We won something even more important than we thought we were fighting for. As we walked out of that boardroom, Emma's small hand in mine, I realized we hadn't just won a fight about educational accommodations. We'd sparked a transformation that would ripple through our entire school community for years to come. The weeks that followed brought changes I never could have anticipated. Emma's confidence soared as she settled back into her routine, but now with the added pride of knowing her entire community had rallied to support her. The peer tutoring program Mrs. Henderson had documented became an official part of the curriculum, with Emma training other students who learned differently to help their classmates. More importantly, the conversation about inclusive education spread beyond Lincoln Elementary. Other districts began reaching out to Principal Adams for guidance on implementing similar programs. Dr. Williams invited Emma to participate in a research study about peer mentoring among children with learning differences, turning my daughter into an unexpected advocate for kids like herself. The most surprising change came from Rebecca herself. 3 weeks after the board meeting, she appeared at our door, her usual polished confidence replaced by something I'd rarely seen from my sister: humility. "I was wrong, Sarah," she said simply. "I watched that video of Emma's presentation online, and I realized I'd become exactly the kind of person I used to despise. I let my own insecurities about being a perfect parent turn me into someone who tried to tear down a child." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Rebecca admitted that seeing Emma struggle had triggered her own fears about her children's futures, about whether she was doing enough as a mother. Instead of addressing those fears constructively, she'd projected them onto Emma and me, turning us into symbols of everything she was afraid of becoming. "Emma's not the problem," she said through tears. "I am. I've been so focused on making sure my kids look perfect that I forgot to teach them to be kind." The reconciliation wasn't immediate or complete, but it was real. Rebecca began volunteering with the school's inclusive education program, using her organizational skills to help other parents understand learning differences. She still struggled with perfectionism, but she was learning, just like Emma, that growth happens when you're willing to be vulnerable. 6 months later, Emma stood on the same stage where she'd defended her right to belong, but this time she was receiving the school's first ever Peer Leadership Award. As I watched her thank her teachers and friends, I marveled at how a battle that began with exclusion had transformed into a celebration of inclusion. "My mama always tells me that being different isn't wrong. It's just different," Emma said into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "And different people see the world in ways that can help everybody learn better." The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most was seeing Rebecca in the audience, clapping with genuine pride for the niece she'd once tried to diminish. As we drove home that evening, Emma chattering excitedly about her award and her plans to help start similar programs in other schools, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed. A year ago, I'd been a single mother terrified that my daughter would never find her place in the world. Now, she was helping create spaces where all children could thrive. The military had taught me about service, sacrifice, and fighting for what's right. But Emma had taught me something even more valuable, that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons or strategies, but with courage, compassion, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to belong. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you or someone you love didn't quite fit the mold, I hope you'll stick around for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe that different isn't less. It's just beautifully, powerfully different. Together we can change the conversation about what it means to belong.